So let's go straight to our guest this evening. Thanks a lot to our technical director. Also, little hiccups his way, but I'm glad that he is able to kickstart the show for us. Those of you around the world, good evening. It's Thursday evening, the 7th day of November. Dr. Jan Mangal. Good evening to you, sir.
Hi, Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. We're ready to rock and roll, but let me first, I'm sure you're hearing us here, right? Yes.
Yeah, I'm hearing you fine.
Good. So let me apologize for the late start. I know you were supposed to have been on yesterday also. It was a mix-up with schedule. So, again, lots of apologizing this week for me. I apologize to you, Doctor. Let's get straight into the business here of oil. I know you don't like to be described as an oil expert, but people are grateful for your contributions around the world, especially our listeners right now. Let's begin. December. Explain this December stuff. What ExxonMobil is talking about that they're going to start what? Shipping our oil out of Guyana?
Yeah, but just before we start, this is my, I believe, third time on your show, Mark, and it's a pleasure to be on again. And it's okay to call you Mark?
Yeah, it's okay, but you can call me Dr. Mark if you wish. I don't have a doctorate as yet, but maybe I'll ask the University of the West Indies to do something for me. But you can call me Mark, Jan. It's okay.
Yeah, I see there's precedent for that. But, so December is first oil, and that's when Exxon or the oil company will start producing. So, there's been a lot of work over the last number of years since FID, which is Final Investment Decision, when the companies decided to move forward with this project in Guyana. So there's been work all over the world, billions of dollars spent building stuff. It's been brought offshore Guyana. Wells have been drilled. Floating facilities or boats are put there to actually process a little bit of processing of the oil. But the oil will actually start to flow either December or January. So that's what first oil means, and that's the big thing you're seeing now about in the press and everywhere in Guyana. But I am not, I come from the industry, and I also see how, this business has affected other countries and has been run in other countries, so the hype doesn't really get to me.
People might be asking, Jan, why doesn't the hype get to you? A lot of people seem to be excited about these sort of things, but why doesn't the hype get to you?
So, the oil will flow. The issue is Guyana going to get its fair share of that oil? And then, secondly, the first issue is, do we get the fair share? And the second issue is, what do we do with that share? Do we squander it? Does it just disappear? And there's just so much risk around both of these items. We know for sure that we're not getting the fair share. All the talk about renegotiation and the contract and stuff. We still get some money from the contract. About 52% of the revenue will come to Guyana, but it should really be more like 70%. We're talking billions of difference here. That's the first part. Then the second part is, how do we spend the money? I don't really see any big improvements since 2015. When we knew we got oil in 2015, that should have been a fire under the government and the politicians in Guyana to say, shit, sorry for my language, but this is a big deal. We need to start doing things differently in Guyana. If we do things the same way, Guyana's not going to benefit from oil. But, I haven't seen that change. I haven't seen the urgency.
When you say start doing things, because I can name about 5 things that are positive developments. But I'd like to hear, and I'm sure that our listeners around the world would like to hear, what are some of the things that you believe that the government should have been doing since 2015 that they're not doing?
Yeah. So we did do a number of positive things. For example, the contracts were released to the public, and that is very important. Even in Trinidad next door, even though they've been producing oil for 100 years, the people still don't have access to the contracts. They don't know the deals. In Guyana, we know because the contracts were released to the public. So that's a big positive step.
A positive step indeed, because the previous administration has refused to even let the public know about this contract. They have basically kept it a big secret.
Yes, and that's transparency. That's the release of contracts. That's a critical ingredient. So that's a good step. But one of the big kind of failures I see is the lack of capacity for people or institutions. You look at the Department of Energy now. I think there's only one oil and gas professional there. They need to have dozens, and should have had dozens of people there, professionals, with 30 years experience or what. For the last couple of years, we practically have no one. So, Exxon is going to be able to, and all the other companies will be able to get the better of us because we don't have the people, we don't have the expertise.
But some may argue, Jan, that even the people who have the experience, years of experience, just don't have, can't fit us into their schedule to be there. For example, you have been an advisor to the president, advising him on this very issue. I'm sure the president would have loved to retain you, but you have other matters to deal with.
That was in 2018, but I made myself available from the summer of 2019. The government didn't reach back out to me, so I won't have an active involvement anymore. But, it's not just myself. The government needs to recruit dozens of people. And what's very important as well to look for look at the people the government will recruit. You have to look at their ethical track record. In this industry, it's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of opportunity for corruption. So we really need to look at people's ethical track record. There are tons of people probably come knocking on the door right now. But we have to be very careful. So we don't have the people and the institutions. And also the anti-corruption is going to has to be a focus. For a country like Guyana to benefit from oil, look at other countries that haven't benefited. And why? It's because of corruption. So for Guyana to benefit, we need to bring a laser-sharp focus to anti-corruption. With all the talk about the previous administration, we haven't been able to prosecute people, and that's not good. And with, the Sahara talking about the Canje and Kaieteur block, well, we haven't seen progress. Those blocks were given away for nothing. And that's robbed Guyana. We haven't seen redress. We haven't seen that being tackled. So, the anti-corruption side is very disappointing as well. On another aspect is Guyana needs to become strong and kind of united, or as united as it can be, to really benefit when negotiating with a strong external international player like Exxon. But Guyana is divided. Since the no confidence vote, things have just kind of gotten worse and become more polarized, and And that does not help Guyana. So what you look for, an ingredient around the world, you need a strong country for the country to benefit. And Guyana is actually heading in the opposite direction. I know it's election time now and everybody is, distracted by the politics and stuff, but I don't see even after elections that, people will unite and kind of create a front or a strong front with the foreign oil companies so as to get a better deal.
Ian, 52% that you've mentioned, the president has been strong in terms of corruption. You are correct as it pertains to convictions, having these culprits who have wrecked Guyana and those who have been hauled before the courts to be convicted. We haven't seen any at all at this time, and there might be certain perceptions as to why the process in convicting these individuals has been stymied, so to speak. But I'm not going to get into that. I think the general public already understand what goes on at Sokou and so forth, and the type of so-called prosecutors that they have there, some who don't even turn up in court. But I don't think we are going to disagree on the issue that the president is very strong on dealing with corrupt individuals and corrupt agencies, because for the first time we have under this administration the money laundering laws that have been passed, and which means that people cannot launder their monies through the banks and all these sort of things. And I'm sure lots of other listeners might be seeing this as a positive step, a step in the right direction. And once these screws are tightened, then I'm not saying that there wouldn't be corruption, but large-scale corruption would not be the order of the day. Would you agree with me on that, or you're seeing it differently?
I agree with that. I agree that the tone from the top, or the tone at the very top only, is a positive tone, and it's a good tone. But, we're not seeing it translate further down into the system. And but the tone at the top is important, and we are seeing, the president set the correct tone. But it seems that the system in Guyana is just so ridden. So it's everywhere. Even we talk about the blackouts, and we hope to one achievement that would have been great for this administration would have been to put the blackouts out. But GPL itself is just such it's such a tough thing, and that's kind of representative of much of Guyana. It's even if we brought the gas to shore, which the project should have progressed and it's not progressing, but even if we brought the gas to shore and the project was progressing, to build a new power plant and bring the gas to shore, GPL would have to be transformed all the way down to the bottom. And it's the same for much of Guyana. The way I characterize this, one of the ways is, this is an opportunity to transform Guyana. If Guyana is going to benefit from oil, it has to transform itself. If Guyana thinks that we're just going to do business as usual, the same old corrupt way in this area or this private sector or this public sector part, if you're still going to do business the same way you've always been doing business, you're not going to benefit from oil. You can't.
There is a news, I think, in Bloomberg, which carried a story about what the IMF is saying. And the headline basically, November 2nd headline, is basically, they're saying, meet the economy that the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, sees growing 86% in 2020. 86%.
Yep, so the challenge with having a resource like this, such a valuable resource coming on, is not so much that number, that growth number, but is how that number is sustainable over the longer term, and then secondly, how it translates to the poor people of Guyana. Because that growth rate most likely will just mean increased cost of living, increased rent, increased cost of food, and the poor people's salaries will not go up. So you can't just look at a growth rate like that and think, yeah, that's great. No, that's actually a bad thing. When you look at such a spike in a growth rate going up and then coming back down, that's a bad thing. That's not a good thing. That should be making the Minister of Finance very worried.
But the rate for this year in terms of growth has been 4.4%.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what this year, last year, or 5 years ago, if 2 or 4 or 5. I was just looking at that big rate you mentioned, the 82. So yeah, if you're saying the rate recently has been good, yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you.
All right, so folks who are now joining us, some folks I've noticed online are asking. We have Dr. Jan Mangal. We're talking about the oil. We're talking about oil revenues, and we're talking about the future of Guyana. And how is it that these things, the oil revenue, is going to be trickled down to you, the people? And that's what we're discussing right now. But Jan, here's what the IMF is actually saying, that the economy is going to balloon 86% next year. That is 2020. 86% after expanding 4.4% this year. That's according to the IMF, like I've said. And that is 14 times the projected pace of China. 14 times the projected pace of China. When you have an economy that is projected to grow, balloon, not just grow, balloon 86%. We've already witnessed 4.4% growth this year. Are you saying that this sort of ballooning of the economy wouldn't trickle down to the ordinary people? And keep in mind that the basic salary prior to 2015 was just under $40,000. Today, it is $64,000 or $65,000 in terms of the wages for ordinary workers. So I am a little more, or by far more, optimistic that the people are going to benefit. And so I don't know how you're feeling about that, but I am very optimistic, sir.
Well, trickle down doesn't work. I mean, that's my view. If trickle down worked, government could just sit back and do nothing. So trickle down doesn't work. For Guyana to benefit, we need very competent and different, government institutions, because we had not all before. So we need new institutions in the financial side as well. This needs to be really planned out and constrained and tackled. Trickle down is, it's not going to work. The ones who will benefit are the private sector. But when you look at that 80-something percentage from the IMF or whatever, that's a gross number. That's probably like, just the revenue coming in. But what would be interesting is to see the projections for, say, how a teacher is going to benefit in the next 5 or 10 years. How a lecturer at UG is going to benefit in the next 5 or 10 years. Because these spikes, like that 80-something percent, we've seen it. We've seen these productions come on stream around the world in countries, and there's a boom and then there's a bust. But that's not a vision for Guyana. That's not, President Ranger's vision as well. He doesn't want a boom or bust. But if you do have a boom, you're going to have a bust.
Well, it depends on the kind of boom. If you have a boom that is being controlled, when I say controlled or managed by a responsible government and of course a responsible president, then you can't expect a bust to be overnight. I'm not saying that this is going to be continuous for another 100 years or 50 years. It's got to stop sometime. But Guyana right now is 4 billion. Its GDP is about 4 billion, right? Which is a tenth the size of the state of Vermont. But look, by 2024, you know what that is going to be from 4 billion? You know what it's going to be? 15 billion. And again, that's according to the IMF. 15 billion in an economy with a population just under 1 million people. Well, it is stuck at 750,000 for the longest while. Gosh, that seemed to me as though there's going to be enough and even lots of stuff running over for a lot of people. The University of Guyana can enhance. We can have a branch bigger in Berbice. We could have a branch in Lethem. We could have a branch in Linden. We could have it all over the place. And lots of other stuff. We can even deal with the Guyana Power and Light that you've mentioned here just now. Our policemen can have more salary. Our nurses and all these things with $15 billion per annum.
Well, I'm not an economist, Mark, but I think, that kind of story will have many economists, developmental economists, very worried. Because Guyana money will arrive in the bank, right? It will arrive. It's not the fair amount. It's not the 70%. It's like the 52%. So we're losing billions, but there will be billions arriving over a longer period of time. The question is, how do you spend that? How do you translate that into sustainable growth? It's very easy to take that money and squander it. Build many more Skeldons, build refineries, build, junk to just white elephant projects to just get the money gets stolen and nothing gets produced. But
speaking of the money getting stolen, and of course we all should be concerned about that, but are you still what is your take with all of this money? Because the first set of oil going to be coming out, we're expecting approximately $300 million, and this money, the money that the government is going to get, it's not going to be going into their pockets. It's going into what is called, I'm sure that you know this, the sovereign fund.
Yeah, so going to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and, there's still debate on the quality of the fund, but at least we have a fund. So there's still some debate on, the decision-making, that the fund itself is too political, meaning it has a minister making the decisions, and it shouldn't be a government official be the ultimate decision-maker, but at least there is a fund.
Who should be the person making the decision, if not the Minister of Finance? Who?
So other countries have learned that you should not have politicians as your ultimate decision maker in managing your oil and gas industry.
Which are the countries? The countries that have failed in their oil revenue?
Like Mexico, Colombia, they switched. So what they created were boards. So instead of having giving too much power to a minister, you create a board where you'd have civil society people on the board, private sector people on the board, and a couple government ministers on the board. And then the opposition as well. So you'd have to get consensus, which is better than just having the minister of the day being the ultimate decision maker. So other countries have switched to that more kind of diverse, consensual type decision making, because politicians come and go. And you can't run an industry which is like a 30, 50-year type industry based on a politician who's just looking for the next election. So that's on the sovereign wealth fund. But once the money, not all of the money is going to go into the sovereign wealth fund, and then so the government has to at the time decide what to do with the money it's going to spend. And Guyana's government procurement process is pretty awful. When I worked with advising the president, I was worked for the IDB, which is the Inter-American Development Bank. And at the time, and the last 10 years or whatever, the IDB is probably one of the biggest funders for donors to Guyana, probably hundreds of millions of US. But when they give money, or they agree to give money to the government, say to go and build a highway, or a bridge or whatever, these projects tend to stall. And many of them stall or have problems because the government's procurement system suffers from corruption, suffers from they don't have enough qualified people, and that's just with the little money that's being spent in the last 10 years. Now we're talking about much more money needed to be spent. The government procurement system has not changed. We don't have hundreds more project managers and qualified people to spend this money. The people aren't there, so it goes back to this attitude like, yeah, so we can get all this money and we still do things the same way we always did them. Well, no, it's not going to work.
Well, as you know, the same IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, has given the government of Guyana a loan for US $11.6 million to take care of the very problems that you're talking about, so that to ensure transparency and all these sort of things. So the IDB seems to have a positive approach in what's happening right now.
Yes, the IDB, I would say, has a very positive approach, but one of the only ones. When you compare the IDB to the World Bank and the other ones, I work directly with the IDB, so I see them, and they mean well, and they're one of the only ones, in my personal view, who are, trying to help Guyana. At least the people in the country, head office in D.C. is a different thing. But the people with the IDB in Guyana, they really cared about, the work they were doing in Guyana. But, so going back to, say, Ministry of Public Infrastructure, they're the ones in charge, or should be in charge of all of these projects. And that ministry needs to be transformed. Key ministries in Guyana that need to be transformed. Obviously, Ministry of Natural Resources, well, we didn't see anything happen there, so created a new Department of Energy. And then still, they only have one professionals, so they're way behind. Ministry of Public Infrastructure needs to be transformed because they have to spend all of this money, build the roads, build the bridges, new airports, new towns. We even need to build new towns and cities because of the rise at sea level. And then the Ministry of Finance as well, and GRA. These are key ministries.
Yeah, they're key ministries, and I get your point. But what is your take on the cash transfers? I do believe the last time you were here, you and I spoke about that. Your views your opinion has since changed?
No, I have the same view, Mark, and I think the president has. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he shares a kind of similar view as well, is that, he's very cautious about it, as opposed to other people. There are a number of risks with the cash transfers. First of all, there should be direct cash transfers to the most vulnerable, but that's a small percentage. But these kind of blanket transfers to everyone, it won't work. Guyana will fall apart. People get the money, they're probably going to leave. And the only ones who are going to benefit are the private sector. Because if you take the oil money and instead of fixing the health system, instead of fixing the education system, instead of fixing the transportation system, you go and give that money direct to the people, the public services are going to remain grossly inferior. And then when someone wants help, they got to go private help. But when they want logistics, transportation, private. But when they want education, private. So the only ones who are going to benefit are the private business men and women. And the whole public sector is just going to disintegrate. So these gross cash transfers is a non-starter in my view. And it's amazing that you have, some prominent people pushing them. But it's election time. So I just put that down to, they're desperate for votes, so they're just talking about it.
Desperate for votes indeed, Dr. Mangal. One of the things, though, and you said that the president has said that it's something to look at, and you have said then that certain categories of people may or should get some portion of that, but emphasis ought to be made on, like, for example, what the president is saying, free education at UG, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of health system, in terms of these sort of things, is what majority of Guyanese are saying that the money should be pumped into, so to speak. And I do believe that majority of the people are in favor of that. And then the conversation should be lifted at some point in time as to, once we see these things happening, becoming a reality, then that there's a possibility that our pensioners, people like myself who may soon become a pensioner, can get an increase in my pension. People like yourself, Dr. Mangal, people like maybe some of the older folks who are listening to this program can get an increase of pension, which they have already gotten. So if it is $20,000 now, with the oil revenue, I do believe it should go to maybe $60,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. Teachers' salaries, minimum, if it's $60,000 or $50,000, it should go to $120,000. Same for the nurses, same for public servants, or policemen and women, our prison guards and so forth. In terms of the roads that we have, it should be properly built. Lights should be all over the country. Proper water, proper electricity, and all these things. I'm in favor of those things 100%.
Yeah, and those things need to be done. And a number of them you mentioned are easy to do, like raising people's salaries, easy to do. But changing the procurement system, the government procurement system, so proper roads are built, proper bridges are built, proper health care is provided, proper education is provided. Those are more difficult. You can easily raise the salary of all teachers, which should happen, but you also have to ensure that the quality of education is being raised, that the quality of public security is improving. What will impact the quality of life of Guyanese people, working class people, more than handouts or disbursements, is quality public services, cheap, sometimes free, quality public services. So free education is a great one, but it needs to be. We've got to raise the quality of it.
Great, raising the quality of it. Let me ask you this, Dr. Mangal. Of the two leaders, well, President Granger and the leader of the opposition, who would you trust to have all this oil wealth, oil revenue? Who would you trust to have control of that out of the two?
Well, I think the question is loaded, and you kind of, I've explained before my point on this and my disappointment with the previous administration and how they dealt with these big projects, like the lack of transparency, the never released contracts, the Skeldon, the issues around Amalia. I am, and then the Canje and Kaieteur block. These blocks awarded just days before the last election to non-entities. These are very bad signs. So, but in Guyana, and we need to kind of move away from A or B and start looking at C, D, E, and F, or how to change A, how to change B. So I obviously, believe in some of the things President Granger has done, around releasing the contracts, and I believe he's well-intentioned with regard to oil. It's unfortunate that, he doesn't have the support and competence below him that is needed, but I believe he's well-intentioned.
Who would you prefer for the to control the oil wealth? How would you feel if Jack Dio is in control, or Air Finale is in control of all this oil revenue? How would you feel?
I don't think anyone should be in control. Any one party should be in control. And we've seen these parties flip-flop for 50 years. And look where we are. The coalition government coming in 2015 was something new. It was a coalition. And, we haven't seen all the promises and the expectations haven't all been met. But at least it's a change. It's a coalition. So looking forward, and because of the lack of constitutional reform, since we don't have the constitutional reform to make politicians accountable, Chinese politicians are really not accountable to the people.
But do we really? But Doc, do we really need constitution reform to make politicians accountable?
Yes, because
we do have these things in certain clauses in the Constitution or sections in the Constitution about corrupt politicians. But the question, though, is, I'm sure that you would probably, I'm not sure, but this is why I'm asking, whether you would have sleepless nights with, nights knowing that someone like Irfan Ali with 19 criminal charges can go to Canada, has refused to submit his transcripts. Whether you'll feel comfortable with someone like Irfan Ali being in control of the oil revenues, or Mr. David Granger, the president, being in control. It's a direct question. Who would you be comfortable with?
I would say my level of discomfort is obviously greater with Ali. It's a bit of a joke. What the PPP are doing now, they're either up to something, it's just kind of confusing. It's a bit of a joke. But what the point I was getting to before with the next parliament is we need a more diverse, since we don't have diversity because of the current system, let's get the diversity in parliament. My personal view is Guyana would be better off if none of these main big parties have a majority. That it would be better to have a number of smaller parties who, so people have to work together. They're going to be forced to compromise and work together.
All right. Your contention is just basically constitutional reform, smaller parties, depending on the quality of individuals who are leading those smaller parties. That, for me, becomes the main question, and to a lot of voters are concerned about that as well. Whilst you may want someone to be the watchdog, but at the end of the day, who is there that's going to be the watchdog that could be any different?
Yeah, and that's a good point. People end up in Parliament and they behave differently. They get a big cushy job, they get the perks, and they behave differently. But we need to, I think, move towards that and hope that some of these people will at least have integrity and will operate ethically.
I recall, I don't know, have you heard of a political party in Guyana called GAP?
That's an older movement, right?
Older, like in about 15 years ago.
Yeah, yep.
It was headed by a guy named Paul Hardy. Brilliant ideas, intelligent guy, but he just lasted for one term and he disappeared. That was the end of him.
Mm-hmm. So, the point I like to make is Guyanese should not look to politicians and their leaders. We kind of look to these people to save us. Well, no. 50 years have gone by and they haven't really saved us. So let's try and save ourselves as individuals, as communities, as groups. Let's start behaving differently.
Of course, and I think that is a conversation. Gosh, I've lived in Guyana. There, I was right there for 20-odd years in that system, and I can tell you firsthand, people are beginning to breathe again. My gosh, Jan, you wouldn't have liked to be there during a certain period prior to 2015. It was horrible, man, and I can say this from personal experience. And lots of people around the country want to breathe. They are breathing again. Things aren't as perfect. I understand what you're talking about as it pertains to transparency and these things, but I do believe that the president is big on that. Look at what happened after 2015. We finally get to see the contract. We know about this contract, this oil contract. Under the PPP government, they refused. Ramotar refused. Mr. Jagdeo refused. Bluntly refused. And so under this government, we get to see the contract. There are two other companies that were given away oil blocks under Ramotar's regime. Yes, just before they got out of office in 2015. And I agree with you that we should be hearing more about who are these persons behind this here. But I'm optimistic that at some point in time, hopefully very soon, that we are going to know who these individuals are. And if, in fact, they were skullduggery, then this particular contract or the contracts should be withdrawn forthwith. That's my take on that. But before we go, Dr. Mangal, let me give you an opportunity, because we don't want you to leave with people thinking that Jan Mangal is just pessimistic about the future of Guyana, even though the economy is set to be balloon or is going to be balloon 86%, our economy booming. You know what that is for a small country in terms of population size? For a country like Guyana? You know what that means? Dr. Mangal, jumping from 4.4% GDP to 15%? I don't know, but I am feeling great. I'm feeling the vibes. Your closing remarks, Doc.
So, yes, things will improve, but don't lose sight of how they should have improved. Because you get a bit of improvement, why accept that when you should be getting a lot of improvement? It's about setting goals. It's about, not just taking the crumbs. You're desperate, you're starving, so you take the crumbs, but you're actually entitled to the whole sandwich. So don't just accept the crumbs. Things will improve, but they should be getting, or they can get a lot better.
One day, I was a little boy in the quarantine, and I didn't carry food to school. And my friend carried a saucepan of food. I think it was one of the Pistano boys. It wasn't the Crawford guys, because they never share their food. Good night, JR. But I turned to my friend and I said, man, give me some food now, man. And he gave me quarter of his saucepan. And you know what? The next day, I had a full saucepan of food, and I was able to share it with everybody. I say that to say that the situation where we were and where we are now, and with the expectation of billions of dollars of oil revenues, and with us getting 52% of that, Dr. Mangal, I am more than optimistic, my friend. I am beyond optimistic for a brighter Guyana, for everyone. A lovely bridge in Linden, with that old bridge that has been there for 40-something years since I was a little boy. Highways, lights, hospitals, health centers, schools, and I'm not talking about building schools and equipping these schools, modern technology, scholarships for hundreds of our young people. I am, Dr. Mangal, optimistic, very optimistic, sir.
Well, I hope, I hope that does, in fact, happen. But there's still a lot of work to be done.
There's always a lot of work to be done. The work never stops in developing a country. And you know that, Doctor. It never stops. It continues. If we build a bridge today, we have to think about building another bridge 5 years from now or 10 years from now. If we build a hospital this year, we have to think about building 2 more hospitals next year.
Yeah.
I think we should.
And we also have some, new challenges ahead, like sea level rise, and it's likely the coast will flood, including Georgetown, in a number of decades. So those things require some big planning and some big decisions for the country.
Can't disagree with you on that, and that is why we have to ensure that certain individuals, unscrupulous individuals, who will destroy our economy, who will basically squander our resources, our oil resources. We've got to ensure, Dr. Mangal. We can't afford, I don't know about you, but I can't see myself running and voting for somebody with 19 criminal charges. You know what they're going to do to our oil revenue? You know what they're going to do to that? We can't take those chances at all. But as always, I appreciate having you as a guest on. You're oil go-to kind of guy. Whenever we need you, just... I will give you a call to come right back on. But I hope to see you back in government someday with the government there advising our president on this whole thing. You seem to have a lot of great ideas. Yes. And hopefully someday we'll see you back in Guyana, sir.
Okay, my pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. And to